Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Cox. I'm the Executive Director of Development for Cal Poly Pomona and University Advancement. It is my pleasure to introduce someone who has spent decades at the intersection of technology, security, and workforce development, and who keeps finding her way back to Cal Poly Pomona. Diane Miller is a CPP alumna, graduating with a degree in computer information systems right here from our university. The university later honored her with an honorary doctorate, a recognition that speaks volumes about the impact she's made on this institution and beyond. She went on to build a 40-year career at Northrop Grumman, where she led global cybersecurity education and workforce initiatives, directed identity and access management for over 90,000 employees around the world, and shaped technical talent strategy at one of the world's largest defense contractors. Today, Diane serves on the advisory board for the California Center for Cyber Risk here at Cal Poly, where she connects students, faculty, and industry in ways that create meaningful change, from experiential learning opportunities to broad public-private partnerships. She also serves as the immediate past chair of the board of directors of the Cal Poly Pomona Philanthropic Foundation, bringing the same dedication to strategic leadership across several other boards on campus. As artificial intelligence transforms every part of the technology landscape, few people are better equipped to speak to what that means for our students, employers, and institutions like ours. Please join me in welcoming Diane Miller.
Thank you, Jeff, for that very kind introduction. It doesn't take much convincing to get me here on campus, even if it means I fly the friendly skies all day from Virginia to get here. It's worth it, because every time I'm here, there's so many cool and exciting things going on. It is just energizing. It's very cool. So I always found that Cal Poly Pomona takes a very unique approach to addressing opportunities and challenges. And I think AI is one area where you see it demonstrated very clearly. Although AI is homed in the College of Letters, Arts, and Social Sciences, its impact goes well beyond that across this entire campus. You can see collaboration at all levels with the 7 other colleges on the campus, and also significant organizations like IT. And I think you see that demonstrated by the number of deans and campus leaders who are participating in this AI fair, because everybody is committed to its success and committed to making sure that Cal Poly Pomona stays at the forefront in AI. I think you also see it if you've had the wonderful opportunity to go down the hall to Ursa Major and see those diverse teams of students. You see all the different student clubs, the research projects, and the diversity of organizations and industry partners that are here recruiting and sharing their expertise. And so I just think that the way Cal Poly does this is the right way to do AI, and frankly, any of the emerging technologies. I came out of the cyber business. But I would say one thing that Cal Poly Pomona does well, and I think it was what I always say was the best thing I got out of being a student here, was that you learn how to learn. You learn the passion for learning and the passion for lifelong learning. And I think as you go around today and talk to students, faculty, staff, industry professionals, it's an opportunity to learn. Every single interaction will help you students as you address problems and you come up with your solutions and just how you address the intake of everything that you see and hear and experience where you're here today, because you never know when you can apply it in your careers. I sat in on the hackathon presentations, and I was just floored by the creativity and the innovation and the out-of-the-box thinking of these student teams and coming up with these business solutions was just amazing. It makes me really proud to be a Bronco. So, and you have yet another learning opportunity coming up right now. I'm just delighted to introduce to you Michael Brent. Michael joins us from Boston Consulting Group in Denver, and he's going to share his expertise in a really, really important topic, responsible AI. So as we at Cal Poly like to look at things in a polytechnic approach from a variety of disciplines and viewpoints and experiential learning, I think this just broadens up that aperture even more for all of us as we learn about the really important topic of responsible AI. So, Michael.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the warm introduction. I'm going to turn on this microphone here. Hopefully we won't get feedback in that microphone there. So I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you to our award-winning Professor Alex Madva for facilitating this. I really appreciate him making this happen. Sure. If you don't know Professor Madva yet, you probably should. He's wonderful. But thank you also to the organizers and everyone supporting this event. Really appreciate being here. So I am going to talk about responsible AI. I will introduce myself just a little bit. That's me on the right there, and say a little bit about my background and then I'll jump into it. So I have a background in the humanities. I have a PhD in philosophy from Columbia University. Go Lions. I'm originally from the Toronto area. If you've heard of Canada, our neighbors to the north. Thank you. We can hang. Okay. So I'm originally from the Toronto area. I did pursue an academic path. I've co-edited a book on mental action and the conscious mind, which is suddenly relevant now that we have AI agents doing things. I never knew my research would actually matter. And here we are 12, 15 years later. But after having a job at the University of Denver as a tenure track professor, I left academia to join a startup, a machine learning startup in New York City, which led to my having a job at Microsoft on their Office of Responsible AI under Brad Smith and Natasha Crampton. And from Microsoft, I've managed to jump to Boston Consulting Group. It's a large management consulting firm, but we have a team of data scientists and engineers building AI systems for our clients. I work with the data scientists and engineers, making sure they're building the tools responsibly. So I'm actually applying my PhD in the humanities and philosophy in the real world. I think I probably have the best job you could ever possibly have outside of academia, given my background in the humanities. So that's a little bit about me. I founded a school called the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research. I'll give it a plug. Look it up. It's pretty cool. Okay. So what am I going to talk about today? Today I'm going to jump into suggesting that we think about AI as critical infrastructure. It's already here. It's already critical, and it's essential to the functioning of society. It's too late, right? We're here already. And then I'll introduce what I think of as responsible AI. And the perspective that I'm going to try to bring today is that of someone who's working with tech companies, right? Who are building the AI systems and who are trying to do that responsibly. So what I'm trying to show today is how exactly can we do that in the absence, largely, of any regulations that might tell us what we should or shouldn't do, at least in North America, and how are companies doing this? So that's what I'm going to try to share today, to give you some insight into what does this actually mean to operationalize this at scale with people building these AI systems and deploying them in the public. So I'll have case studies, calling it responsible AI in action. They're anonymized, but they're real. All 4 of them are from my actual work. So I'll walk you through some examples of what we do and how we actually try to do this. I'm happy to clarify and take questions about it later, but I will obviously not share the clients' names. And then I'll end with maybe a couple of one slide, one page on what's coming. Because we've built responsible AI in light of sort of a traditional notion of AI and frantically tried to catch up to generative AI, but it's already too late there as well, because we're moving beyond generative AI. And so the question for people in my field is, how do we possibly get ahead of what's coming next on the horizon? And that horizon is literally out your front door, right in front of us, right? It's not far away at all. And then I'll wrap up with some remarks, and if there's time for Q&A, happy to take questions. So that's the plan. Let's jump in. So I think it's fair to say AI is already critical infrastructure throughout society, top to bottom, left and right, inside and out. There's examples you've all heard of. I've put them there on the left-hand side, but AI is already embedded in decisions across these 5 main categories and has been for years, but perhaps now only coming to light, perhaps as a result of things like large language models, are we finally seeing this in the public, but it's been there for years already. So it's telling people, do you get a credit card? Do you get a loan? Do you get a mortgage? What are the terms of that loan, right? What's your APR? Those are decisions made in part by artificial intelligence systems already for years. On the hiring side, for the students in the room, if you're about to embark on your career, you're already applying for jobs, AI will tell the hiring manager who to interview. AI will tell the hiring manager, are your credentials meeting the job description? Then once you're hired by the company, the decision can be made in part by an AI system supporting that hiring decision. And when you're there, right now, where I work, for example, part of the hiring, retention, promotion, and possible termination paths are also internally partially determined with the support of AI. Right now, in this moment in time. Medical treatment, you've probably heard of diagnosis, of sort of AI diagnosing X-ray images as a common example, but it's everywhere, from how to prioritize medical treatment, how to allocate surgery rooms and doctors to those rooms in a way that optimizes the use of those rooms, personalized healthcare through your watch, through your Ring, through other apps that you might be familiar with, diagnostic imaging, right? These are already happening right now. Social media, internet search, right? You know this content, whether fake, whether amazing, whether garbage, whether slop, has been built with, right, AI. This is happening right now. And on an academic setting, research, writing, creative work, operational decisions, software development, already being done with AI, right? So these are examples. Hopefully most of them are somewhat common to you already at this point in time. Nothing new here. But from a business perspective, the CEOs whose names appear on the right-hand side of my slide, at these large companies whose logos, one of which is actually in the room, right, with us today, AWS, the leaders of these companies are pushing even further, right? They are adopting AI at scale in their companies and with those companies' clients. And if you look at the list there, I would argue those 5 names touch on billions of people, indirectly or directly, right? In their work, in their tools, in their software, et cetera. So the push is only getting more aggressive to adopt these tools even more rapidly. Why does that matter? Because, as you know, AI goes awry all the time. And this is becoming increasingly visible to the public. Hopefully you're hearing of the sort of news stories that I've captured on the bottom or just snippets from media, but these are everywhere. MIT has an AI incident database that it updates regularly. The number of AI incidents publicly disclosed has continued to exponentially go up every year. Those are global incidents that are reported where AI has done something wrong, hopefully not, but something harmful. So the cases that are, the examples that are mentioned on the bottom, some of them are maybe more mundane, others of them are utterly tragic and depressing. And so the examples of AI causing harm are something that we need to be absolutely critically aware of. So while the push is aggressive, the harms are also becoming more visible and arguably worse from the perspective of harms. So these are the kinds of things that we're seeing in the media reports, right? AI is introducing bias, but it's way more than bias. There's plenty of other harms resulting in legal action, reputational damage. It's important to businesses in the business community that people trust these companies, but these disclosures damage that trust that we have in these companies. Financial losses from fines, but lost missed business opportunities. And increasingly here in California, in New York, and other countries around the world, increasingly regulatory demands are being placed on these corporations and scrutiny for what they're doing. So this means, given this sort of situation, we want to ask, like, what is responsible AI in this context, right? Rapid development, increasingly visible public harms, and very little regulation. That's the environment that we look at. So there are companies, such as the one I work for and have worked for before, that are trying to actually operationalize responsible AI, in spite of not having any direct, let's say, legal pressure yet to do so. So this is where we get into the work that I'm trying to do, and to give some examples and insight into what it actually means to operationalize this at scale. So this is our BCG definition of responsible AI. This is the one we work with. So we think of it just this way: aligning your development of AI systems with your own organization's values, right? Most places have their own statement of core values, and also with widely accepted norms of right and wrong, while, of course, because it's a business context, achieving transformative business impact. So we're trying to think of how do we generate that business change? How do we make better business decisions, efficiencies, et cetera, while also trying to not harm people, right? While also trying to hew to these widely accepted norms of right and wrong. And what did those look like for us? So those are the principles that we use. We share those with NIST, with the Canadian government, OECD, and the UN on the bottom right there. These are the principles that if you did a kind of search, turning off Gemini, minus AI, right? Turn off the AI. If you did a search for what are our AI principles, these are the common ones that you'd see, and these are the ones that have become sort of industry best practice. I'll say more about them and I'll use examples to illustrate this soon. So these are the principles that guide our work. We want AI basically to be fair and equitable in the outcomes that it produces. Reliability and safety, privacy and security. I don't need to read them all, but these are the guiding core principles. And our work has increasingly intersected with the people in the professions who do this. So I do partner with IT. I do partner with legal. I do partner with the Data Privacy Office. We all have to do this together. So this is what I'm now we think of as a stakeholder or an ecosystem of stakeholders. So responsible AI is not just a team, my team, the 10 of us around the world yelling at data scientists and telling them, please don't hurt people. The ecosystem is actually much larger than that. And it involves multiple stakeholders, from those developing the AI systems themselves. So we might think of the frontier model developers, but not just those, of course. From the people such as where I work, the institutions who are sort of deploying them or helping clients and organizations, businesses, et cetera, to deploy these AI systems, and then everyone else in the room, right? Society at large. Those are the people who are actually impacted by these AI systems once they're deployed. This is the stakeholder, I would say, the entire responsible AI community involves input, collaboration, and coordination across all of this sort of three categories of people. Because there is no yet sort of national AI law, for example, in America, because there is no, other than something like the EU AI Act, or there's a new Vietnam AI law that just came into effect, for example, there's very little regulation right now. So we have to do this across a system of stakeholders where we're all trying to do it our best without having yet clear guidelines of best practices, right? We are building them up as we go. We are making them up as we go because we have to develop this stuff from scratch. This stuff meaning how to do this responsibly, right? There are no guidelines. We're making the ship as we sail it. Okay, so this is how I frame it when I think about what is responsible AI. The goal is minimizing harm in the broadest possible sense, right? Psychological harm, emotional harm, physical harm, environmental harm, economic harm, right? In the broadest possible sense of harm, and aligning with these stakeholders. And perhaps you can think for a minute immediately and see there's tension across these different stakeholder groups, right? We're not always aligned in what we want to achieve. I think every single day, what I'm trying to do is enable the business to succeed from a financial sense, right? And that's in tension with sometimes doing what's right. And so this is very challenging work. And every single day, that tension, which is as old as tensions that we can imagine in a capitalist society itself, right? Those tensions are at the forefront of what we do every single day. So it's very hard, actually. I'm not patting myself on the back, but it is very challenging work because we want to get this right. But getting it right is involving navigating serious, deep tensions that are old and hard to move. So now, in practice, right, what am I actually doing in my day job before I get into the kind of case studies that try to illustrate that? So if we've done our job right, the intended outcomes are what we meet, right? So what you see on the right-hand side there. If we've done our job well, we've made sure that those are the goals that we've met so that the outcomes of the AI systems that we're helping build are accurate, reliable, and explainable. That's already very, 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 very hard. Simply, as you know, none of these, like a large language model, is almost impossible to make sure its outputs are reliable 100% of the time. We try to make sure every AI system we build is secure, so your data is safe, right? And so it lowers the likelihood of cyber attacks, which if you've heard of the recent release of Mythos, I think it's called, by cloud, we're already in trouble again with how we're going to do that. And data governance practices, preservations of privacy, and again, minimizing the harms and the negative impacts on society, and making sure, and this is going to get incredibly tricky as we move into agentic AI. So these are AI systems that not just produce outputs, but actually take actions in the world, where we will have a deep tension with how are we doing this in a way that doesn't replace human capacity, right? And in a way that augments it. And so what I think we're going to see very quickly is we're going to have to think of humans and AI systems as hybrid. And we're going to have to think of them as partners in this work, in augmenting and improving our work rather than replacing our work. But you can imagine that's a very difficult decision if you come to an organization and say, no, you don't need to actually reduce your workforce. You don't need to let these people go. Why don't we augment their work rather than replace them with AI? That is a very difficult conversation to have, right? And that the tensions that I mentioned earlier come up again as an example right there. But that's our goal. If we can do this properly, these are the goals that we want to get to. So in practice, I can say a little bit more about what I actually do on my day job, right? How does this get to the nitty-gritty of operationalizing it in that sense? So what we have is a policy at BCG. Again, we haven't invented it. Other companies use it. Microsoft does too, for example, which lays out a risk framework, a tiered risk framework. So we say these use cases are high risk. These other use cases are moderate risk. And these we don't care about. Well, yeah, not as much. So we have this framework. We're using the EU AI Act for our example. We have double the number of high-risk use cases that compared to the EU AI Act, but that's our sort of guiding North Star. So the framework tells us, okay, data scientist, if you're building an AI system and it's going to be used in an educational setting for any purpose whatsoever, that's high risk, we've determined. So for example, because we know any AI system used in any context of education carries risk of harm, right? So that's an example of what our policy would say, all right, now we have to kick off a review of this use case. So that's the risk taxonomy and assessment. So then my team uses an AI impact assessment. These are also publicly shared. You can find examples of them online. We use something very similar. So we sit down with the stakeholders, we sit down with the client, we sit down with my team and the data scientists, and we ask a bunch of questions to try to surface the risk framework, the risk profile of that use case. Basically trying to understand what are the ways in which this could go wrong, right? Once we've done that assessment, we identify, this is part of the multi-stakeholder review, we identify a series of mitigations that we think would lower the risk of harm, right? That's what my team does. We build those mitigation strategies, and then we present them to a multi-stakeholder committee. And many organizations are doing this as well internally. They've stood them up on their own accord. So we have a responsible AI council. That council is a member, I think there's about 18 senior executives from across the world, from across different backgrounds, data privacy, information security, but also client-facing firm leadership who have business experience in these areas. And then they basically tear up my review to shreds. And they say, no, you can't do any of this. Or these are great mitigations, but have you thought of these other ones? And they bring their expertise to the table to make sure that people like me aren't making the decision, to make sure it's made across an entire review committee from people of different backgrounds and different experiences. So they give us the sign off. They say, great, these mitigations are awesome. Go ahead and build. So then our data scientists and engineers sit down and start building, right? They start vibe coding with Cloud Code and building something incredibly quickly. My team then evaluates and tests those large language models and any of the AI systems that they've built with the client. So we then try to break it. We use what's called red teaming. It's like we've stolen it from the IT community, but we try to basically push the large language model or the AI system that's built around it, right? Push it to its limits to find out, can it actually be reliable? Yes or no in this specific context? Is it biased in its outcomes in that specific context? Yes or no? So we conduct rounds and weeks of testing and evaluation to make sure the AI system is ready to go, at least that we've mitigated the risks to the level that we're all comfortable with, because it's never zero. And then we start training it with the end users, right? The people who are going to actually engage with this system are then part of pilot projects. We launch, we make sure it's working, we get their feedback, we iterate again and approve, and off we go. And once it's finally out in the world, we don't stop there. Responsible AI, as we understand it, includes post-deployment monitoring. So once a system is launched into the world, it can change fundamentally. Once it's out and being used with different data, for example, the model can drift in a mathematical sense that we care about. And we want to make sure once this thing's unleashed, who the heck is responsible for turning it off if it goes wrong, right? Who the heck is actually going to look at the outputs 6 months later and understand, is it doing what it was trained to do? Oftentimes, there's no requirement to do that, right? This is something that perhaps legislation might come and actually enforce this. But right now, post-deployment monitoring is like a choice that organizations have to make, right? To decide, I better look at this once it's out live in the world. and make sure it's working properly. So that's part of what we do. We set that up for our clients, and then feedback and escalation. So if there's a problem, how do you report it? So can you tell ChatGPT, you suck? No. No. Who do you report it to? Hi, Sam. Can you fix that for me? Right. So a responsible use of AI includes ways to actually get feedback and escalate and improve models over time from actual feedback from the public, in my humble opinion. Okay, so that's what we do. I'm going to make it a little bit more alive if I can with some case studies. Hopefully it's not boring. Is everybody okay? I'm going to turn on teacher mode. Okay, sorry. All right, fourth wall doesn't exist. Okay. So some case studies. These are real examples from my work. Let me make sure I didn't accidentally go over one. Okay. So these are real examples. I am not making any of them up. And these are just to sort of highlight what we're actually trying to do in the real world. And in showing these examples, I'm trying to surface uses of AI that may not be obvious, right? They're not super duper obvious perhaps to everyone, but they're incredibly risky nonetheless. And what we've tried to do in helping mitigate the risks that we see. So this example, give you a second to read the setup, is in the rectangular green square. So this is a voice bot that wants to call you if you've missed a payment on your credit card, remind you of your late payment, and then attempt to collect your debt. So already a stressful situation in general, right? You've entered into a scenario where we're talking about vulnerable groups, at least insofar as they have some debt, right? And however trivial it might seem, it's still a vulnerable position. And the voice bot wants to call. And what I'm sharing with there is this is the kind of the risk profile that my team built up, right, in our assessment of this use case, and what we tried to surface as the kind of questions that we're really concerned about. So it's just a snapshot of those. There are more that you could probably think of and probably want to mitigate against. But here we were worried about, for example, the voice bot was going to be deployed in a country where there was regional dialects in the language of the community that it was serving. So we wanted to make sure we could just pretend it's English, but it wasn't, but let's pretend it's English. Will it understand when it's actually being spoken to the subtleties of language of the people who are speaking? And have they trained it to understand a diversity of way of speaking English? Right? They did not, right? They weren't ready to do that yet. But that's the kind of risk we want to make sure the chatbot is actually providing the same quality of service to all of the people and is fair in that sense, right? We were worried, of course, about will it say things like going off the rails, which is actually quite easy to get a chatbot to do. And so you don't want it, for example, to sell you a car for $1, right? Which has happened, real example, or it misunderstand the bereavement policy of your airline and force you to pay double when you're trying to reschedule due to a death in the family, right? The real example, right? You want the chatbot to not go off the rails in that sense, right? Security, again, right now people are jailbreaking is the somewhat technical term. You could very easily get the voice bot to disclose its prompt in source code if you know the right ways to break it. We want to prevent that from happening. We want to build the guardrails around it. Transparency, I think it is not yet a law that a chatbot has to announce itself to you as such, but we made it the case that we did. Right? They said hello, and it did not anthropomorphize or personalize its own sort of way of being to accidentally trick people into thinking it was a human. And accountability and job displacement. You can imagine where most of the customer service representatives that I know of are employed in the global south. And so we have already a labor displaced community that's being underpaid relative to other countries. And they are about to be displaced even further, right? As the chatbots are used to basically put them out of work. So we wanted to make sure that the client understood how to support those folks and make sure that do they need to be eliminated, that their roles need to be eliminated, or were there ways to sort of upskill them and help them not lose their job? Okay, next one, hospital resource allocation. This is I thought, a really challenging one. This was a surgery center in Europe that wanted to be, a large public health system wanted to schedule surgeries in an optimal way. And so they basically, that's the setup there. Waiting lists, so people these are non-emergency surgeries. To be clear, these are scheduled surgeries. I think having an AI tell you which emergency is most urgent would be a horrible idea, but that's not what they were doing here, thank goodness. This was scheduled surgeries. So the idea was basically taking a combination of patient data, surgery type, doctor availability, the time at which the surgery should occur, the duration of the surgery, the room. They basically wanted to fill up all of the operating rooms as optimally as possible, right? And I think a human being was doing it, and they were not enjoying their job and doing a really bad job at it. So they wanted basically, let's do this more efficiently. So that was what we were asked to do. How do we help lower the risk associated with this use case? What we were worried about, again, highlighting the green font there highlights the main categories of worry that we were trying to mitigate. In the end, it actually did get to a place after training it and running a pilot, like a short study on it, and then launching it in one of the hospitals, and then slowly in 3, and then 8. It actually got really good at doing this, and I was very surprised. I was personally incredibly skeptical walking into the room, like there's no way you're going to get this working properly, and it has. It's an interesting success story, but we were worried about these sorts of factors. I think that was not intentional, but it did sound great. We're worried about a lot of the human beings that are going to use these AI systems, like the actual scheduler in the hospital. She, he, or they are not at all trained in how to understand what's going on here, right? They're simply given a software with an output on a screen, and they're told, here's the optimal schedule. Go ahead and do that one for today, right? So one of the things that we're really worried about in these kinds of use cases, I put under the heading of transparency, because the end user, which is just, again, a scheduler at the hospital, probably working, they're not necessarily going to know how the heck did this decision come to be. They're not going to understand how the ranking occurred, right? How the scheduling occurred. And they're not going to be able to challenge it. And they're not going to know, and they're going to adhere, we were worried about automation bias, as in they're not going to challenge it and say no. They're just going to assume this thing is smarter than me, it's been built by BCG, and those guys are smart, and because we paid them a lot of money, we should trust the output of this AI system. So we really wanted to build in friction points, right, for the end user and tell them, how do you actually interact with this? Get toward that sort of hybrid model of working with AI, right? Rather than having, last time I'll do that, working with AI rather than having the AI work over you, on top of you, or replacing you, right? And so we built into the tool, the output had these sort of buttons and ranks and colors that could enable them to see different optimization choices that they could make. Here's the machine output is 1, 2, and 3, and you, human being, with your expertise, you pick which one of those 3 is the one you want to run. To give them that element of choice and partnering with the AI system and doing so. Okay, next example. This is for those of you who are students in the room or faculty, switch it to student evaluation if you want. Performance evaluation in an employment setting is very similar. It's a very similar and popular use case. So here, this is an accounting firm. Every 6 months, everybody's reviewed and or fired if they're not performing up to speed. And the firm wanted to build an AI system that analyzes the written feedback that a manager, or your colleagues, whomever else provided of you for that 6-month period. I pull out from that feedback the strengths and weaknesses, and then produce an automated summary. So this, if you haven't worked in a corporate setting in your life, this is a very stressful time for everyone at the company and a very difficult task to do. And as a director, it's really repetitive and boring. It's kind of like grading 1,000 things, right? Over and over and over again. So you can see why this is ripe for automation, right? You can understand from a business case, this is a way to make things more efficient and fast and make a task that is tedious and repetitive a little faster and a little less onerous on the people doing it. So you can understand why this might be a good idea, maybe, right? In theory. So the risk that what we were worried about is this was also built on top of a large language model. And what we learned was if you took the exact notes, so the written feedback, right? We took all the exact written feedback, we made copies of it, we changed the pronouns and only the pronouns, exactly identical feedback otherwise, right? So you get the setup. We ran it into the early version of the model through the LLM, which we did not build. It's the one that you know of, right? The LLM produced systematically different strengths and weaknesses from the very same input. That's the kind of risk that we're trying to identify and mitigate, right? That was shocking to me. It was just the pronoun. So Michael, he, right, did this. Michelle, she did this, right? And another name and another pronoun, they did that. That's it. That's all we changed. And we didn't see something like female identifying pronouns. They were discriminated in a way that was reflected in the length of the summary. So how many words the system outputted, the kinds of words it picked up on, right? And they were gendered and stereotypical qualities highlighted, even from the same employee feedback, right? I'm just trying to emphasize that. It was the same. So we had to work very hard to get rid of that bias from the AI system's outputs. And it's very hard to do because we are not like controlling the underlying LLM, right? The client has already purchased that enterprise license, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, these are the kinds of risks that we're trying to figure out. Can we solve these risks? If we lower these risks and mitigate them successfully, we could have a very powerful tool here, right? But getting it right is really difficult. It's really challenging so far in the environment that we face now. Last example, I think. Sorry. Yeah. So this is a good one. A large supermarket retailer in a country that sells alcohol in, I'm saying this as a Canadian growing up, not being able to buy my liquor in a regular store, having to go to this other special store. But this country, like America, you could buy liquor anywhere you want. So it's one of these large supermarket retailers. They wanted to send you ads on your phone. So it's like a loyalty club that you might join here in America, right? Famous loyalty club. You shop there for your groceries all the time. You have the app on your phone. You've already downloaded the app. Now they're thinking, what if we surfaced ads in that app when you got in the store, right? The phone knows you're in the store. If you've got that setting, enable that setting. And it's going to just pop up an ad on your phone while you're walking around the store looking at your shopping list. And among the products that they wanted to surface ads for was alcohol. So one of our high-risk areas is substances that can be abused, right? So my team was called in. How do we do this so that all and only children get the ads at exactly the right time? And that was the business question that no, of course not. They were worried, how do we surface these ads in a way that's responsible, right? That won't actually surface ads to children, won't reinforce gender stereotypes. And a nuance I want to point out, and I won't spend much time on this because I know I'm approaching time already. A nuance was with the fairness point here. The retailer said, I want gender-based stereotypes because they generate sales. And so we had to actually think about how to make the bias okay. Right? It was like, yeah, that's not good. But also, is that my fight to fight? Right? Like, as a responsible AI practitioner, how do I draw the line, right? How do I help them, but also recognize, yeah, you know what? Certain people, based on age, based on gender, tend to buy these products. That's horrible, probably for lots of reasons. But the retailer, they didn't want us to change the algorithm to fundamentally screw over their sales, right? So it was an opportunity where we had to live with a bias, try to understand, is that an okay bias? How do we, right? So these are the kinds of things that we try to understand and mitigate in our work, in our examples. Okay, I'm at 30 minutes. Can someone tell me when I should shut up? Do I have another minute, or should I? Okay. Thank you, award-winning Professor Alex Madbo. Okay, the last thing I'll say, very last slide. This is what's coming. I'm going to be incredibly brief. I've been talking basically about traditional AI and large language models. That's the kind of examples that I gave you, the 4 case studies. We're already at a place where it's much, I would say, provocatively, much worse. Where it's much worse from a responsible AI perspective. It's worse because everything I just said, our responsible AI governance practices, everything I outlined, it's not ready for any of this. We've just barely figured out the responsible AI practices 101 or version 1, right? And now we're already being asked to change immediately to get ahead of this. So I won't spend much time. I don't actually think artificial general intelligence, AGI, I personally don't subscribe to that being possible, but it is something that people are investing in, and people with a lot of money think it's possible, so it's worth at least saying people are trying to create systems that possess human-level intelligence that will fundamentally change the world in all possible ways, good, bad, and in between. World models are coming, so large language models are very limited in how they represent physical reality, but the next, I would call it, evolution of models is to hybridize world models, which represent space and time, causation, things of that nature, how objects move in space, and couple that with a large language model. That will get us very close to incredibly smart things. So Claude Code, if you know, right now it's just been launched, has a hybrid kind of model, a traditional AI and one of these kind of world models that have symbolic representations built into them. That evolution of AI will take us to a place where the AI systems are much more intelligent. Are they super intelligent? Probably not, in my opinion, personally, but incredibly intelligent, much more so than the LLMs that we currently see. Wearables, I'm wearing them now, but what's happening is the on-device AI. So AI is now efficient enough to be loaded up like on your phone, on your wearable, not in the cloud, where you have to make a call to the model and it sends an output. The wearable AIs, the glasses, I'll probably get fired, so I won't say anything about them. But the glasses with the cameras, yeah, that's already here. And the agentic AI systems, these are things that actually take action with no human oversight. They perform actions in the world that were already here. And so this is a world in which these developments are underway right now. We need the academic community to focus on how do we understand these? How do we get ahead of these? How do we actually mitigate these? And to partner with people who are trying to actually build them to make sure we're doing this safely. Because right now it is an largely unregulated space, right? There's no chance regulators can keep up with this. It's impossible, the rate at which this is going. But this is where I think personally, where we need to focus and where we need to set our best minds across the humanities, social sciences, all of the sciences, right? Try to figure this out. Because I think the moment that we're at right now is, non-trivially, I think, immensely important. And there's a global scale, huge change that's happening. And I know it sounds dramatic, but it is on the scale of the Industrial Revolution. I genuinely believe that based on what I'm seeing in the business community. That's not an exaggeration. And I think we need to immediately get involved in trying to figure this out. And I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah. We have a little time for Q&A, so we don't have as much as we'd like, but that's not our fault, just so you know. And so we're planning to, we'll start the panel at 1:30 instead of at 1:15. So we have a little bit of time now. And then the breakout sessions will happen at 2:45 instead of 2:30. Okay, I'm gonna run around with the mic. Okay, Gaia gets first dibs because she's gonna be one of the panelists.
Thank you. Thanks for the talk, super interesting. I was wondering, so you mentioned that one of the objectives is like obtaining fairness. Now, in the academic community, of course, this is like a big topic and there's like many different notions of fairness and some of them are incompatible with each other. So one example is like individual fairness and collective fairness. The two typically don't, like there's many cases in which they conflict. And I guess in your work, you would have to actually choose one concrete notion of fairness. And then, so how do you go about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. We flip a coin, ask ChatGPT, and just go with it, you know? Just go with it. Easy. No, hey. Sorry, Gaia. Okay, that's a great question. The annoying answer is we go on a case-by-case basis. Each of those use cases is in a different context, a different community, a different client, a different country, different laws. And from there, we decide, what does fairness mean right here in this specific use case? At that level, there is very few, in my experience, there have been very few actual competing notions of fairness. When you get down to the fine-grained level of what this AI system is doing, it is very clear to me, fairness here means this. Yeah, but you're right. At a global level, at a higher level, there's no one singular notion of fairness that's correct and true. I think that's right. Yeah, thank you.
Michael, I'll be very quickly. Actually, a question for the student. As one of the MBB top consulting company like BCG, when you see people say you are hiring less people, but you are paying individual much higher. So when you are seeing candidates like our students, what are you looking for their skill, personality?
Great question.
BCG are recruiting.
Thank you. That is an amazing question. For the students in the room, one of the things that I skipped over was AI fluency. So wherever you want to work in whatever industry is like pulling you in and that you're interested in and passionate about, find a way to become fluent in how AI is being deployed in that system, that area of work right now, so that I'll use a metaphor of ownership, right? So you own the AI and it does not own you, right? That's the highest possible level I could answer. We're looking immediately for, on my team, for example, technical fluency. We want people who know how to use AI systems, and that's definitely something that's going to be demanded of entry-level positions at places like where I work and everywhere else. So I think that's the short answer is quickly understand, where do I want to go? What kind of work do I want to do? And how will AI impact that? You can ask me, send me an email. Well, no joke. Just you can ask people, your teachers, your professors, other people in your network, and figure that out. Because you will absolutely be left in the proverbial dust if you're not able to become fluent in AI immediately. Yeah.
Hello. So I'm wondering,
Hi, thanks.
so I'm wondering if it's a factor in your thinking about this at all, or like if like to what extent, like not just the case itself, but like how this case sets a precedent for like, okay, this is a concrete way they're doing it. More people might do it like this in the future.
Right. Thank you. That's a great question too. So I can speak to what my team does. Obviously, it may not generalize. So we have a kind of a repository of risks and a repository of mitigations that we build over time that is tagged to certain categories of use case so that we can repeat those mitigations and test that they're actually working over time. And we share them amongst our responsible AI. So our AI practitioners, we kind of have like a de facto, Slack channel kind of a thing where we also share our best practices across companies to try to learn from one another. And the final thing we're trying to do to actually, I think, hopefully I got the gist of your question, is how are we sharing these learnings and growing as a community and making sure we're not just keeping them away from the public's eye. Right. So the last thing we do is I think it was 2025, had a Red Team Summit that we hosted in our New York office, and we brought in Salesforce. Microsoft said yes, Google said no if Microsoft's there. And AWS came, a bunch of people came who were doing red teaming, closed the doors, Chatham House rules. We talked, which is just like open conversation. What are you doing? How do we make this work? Can we share our best practices? That's what we've been trying to do. Hope that answers the question. Cool.
Hi, thank you for being here. I had a question about governance in your position. So ethics officers, ombuds officers, preferable chain of command is to report to the board rather than the CEO. How does that look like in responsible AI?
Okay, I'll speak generically because I guess that's one of those secret sauce questions I can't talk about in detail. But I can talk about Microsoft because I don't work there anymore. Haha. Okay. So in other companies where responsible AI, some companies have a chief AI ethics officer, organizations and companies and schools. Like this is a role that is important and should be definitely created. So we tend to roll up to the senior most people, luckily. And that's been my experience so far at the various places that I've worked. So it's not a board. No, we have the Responsible AI Council that I mentioned. That group holds ultimate decision-making authority, but my team and my organization roll right up to the top. So I think that's the way to do it, to have buy-in from leadership at the very top. And I think increasingly we're going to see that CEOs and other leaders take on the AI agenda, as we can call it, internally for themselves. Yeah, they're realizing this is that level of importance.
Okay, give it up for Dr. Charles Michael Brent.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
So grateful that you came. All right, we can do better. Let's hear it again. Okay, nice. Okay.